Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am so delighted today to have another beautiful, fabulous author in our author series. We are talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the nitty-gritty of what it's like being an author and what people want to know about that, the backside of that, the book writing and all of that good stuff. So today we have author Traci Abramson. I'm so happy. She goes by that full name, Traci Hunter Abramson. So when you see that, you know you got the right person. So nice to have you here today.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about some of this nitty gritty, but here, just give you the official bio, okay? So she grew up in Arizona, kind of normal stuff, and then moved to Venezuela for a study abroad program. But then after graduating from Brigham Young University, she worked for the CIA. Yes, the Central Intelligence Agency. So we're going to get into the juicies of that. And so she eventually resigned to raise her family, which is wonderful. But she credits the CIA with giving her that wealth of ideas for her books. And if you haven't read any of them, pick them up. Romantic suspense, government thriller with an element of romance, all of these juicy things, even contemporary romance. She's got her fingers in a whole lot of author pies, so it's very exciting. Has 5 kids and she loves coaching their local high school swim team. She has written more than 30 best-selling novels and is a 7-time Whitney Award winner, including Best Novel of the Year in 2017 and 2019. We are thrilled to have you. Now, I have to speak from personal experience. I just finished Mistaken Reality just a week or so ago. Loved it, riveting. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to kind of go back to, Kate, what made you even get into the CIA? And then we're going to talk about how that dominoed into you writing. So take us through that.
So basically, I majored in finance at BYU. And I mean, international business and finance is what interests me. So I was like, oh, sure, we'll do something because, when I was a kid and I wanted to be an author, nobody actually does that for a living. So I had to do, something practical. So I was recruited actually by the bishop from my husband's home ward in Virginia. He worked for the CIA and he was the recruiter that year, my senior year. And he's like, you should be on my interview list. And I was like, oh, you're looking for accountants. I don't do that. That's counting pennies. So I'm like, I like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he's like, well, come interview with me anyway. So he had me come back and I was actually one of the 2 people they took. So I was literally recruited just off the steps of a building at BYU.
Were you nervous? I mean, the CIA, did that make you nervous or your parents nervous?
I decided when I was in 3rd grade, I was going to be a spy. So that was, of course, I was going to be a horse jockey and, a veterinarian and everything else too. Olympic swimmer was on the list as well. So I had lots of plans, but spy was one of them. So I was like, oh, this is close.
This is great. So I don't know if you tell us, if you'd have to kill us, right? But what kind of things did you do? More analytical things at the CIA, or was it, field stuff? What was that like for you?
So I was always administration. So I was always support, but really for what I do now, it was perfect because I basically was like, an analyst, they have a specific area of expertise and field agents have a specific area of expertise. For me, I got to look at the whole picture. Yeah. And so if you know where the money is going, you kind of know what's going on.
Yes.
And so that's pretty much what I was doing is, during the first Gulf War, I was a liaison officer, so I was able to work with a lot of other government agencies. So that's where I have that familiarity with, National Security Agency and FBI and, Secret Service, all of those people I worked with, on a daily basis. So I couldn't have asked for a better background.
Oh, that is just, you're the hub. And so you're able to draw from all of those experiences and the vernacular and how they would do protocol and all of that from your own experience, never mind research. Love that. So when did it start to shift that tide? How long did you work for the CIA then?
So I was just over 6 years at the CIA. And then probably right around that time, like at the end of college, I started writing just for a hobby. It was like my little escape from reality. And I would say probably like the last 6 months I was at the agency, we were getting ready to move and trying to, like sell our house and things like that. And so I started writing just for fun. And for the first time, I actually finished a book. And it was like, I take it back, it was probably close to a year beforehand. So I finished a book and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so then I'm like, I'm gonna do it again. And so I wrote another book and I did it 3 times and every book got progressively worse.
love the authenticity.
Because it was like everyone I was trying to do, well, I did it in 4 months or 5 months, and I bet I could do one in 4 months. So I was doing like this race against myself, and I had no clue what I was doing. And I was a complete closet writer. Like nobody knew I did this. Like my husband didn't know. Nobody knew I did this.
Wow.
So, I mean, I was trained at the CIA. You know, if I want to keep a secret,
I'm a spy, and I know how to hide.
I can keep a secret. So anyway, you know, when I finally quit, I resigned to be able to stay home with my kids. And so that was really what transitioned me into, really, it was motherhood, and I started coaching and stuff. But then I also had the opportunity I had a little more downtime. And so I abandoned those first 3 books and started doing a different one that had been on my mind for years and years and years. So, and that's what ultimately became Undercurrents. So.
And I just reread that just the other day. Yes. And then you did that 3-part series with it. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. That was a trilogy.
So motherhood, I love that was sort of the catalyst for you to find this other area of your life. And I find that with women so much, that our way of living is not so linear as often as men are, that we have a variety of layers that we can tap into if we are open to it and if we choose to. So I love that was the catalyst to find this other avenue and this other aspect of yourself. So as you were starting to write, what did you love about it? Did you find that it was a natural process to be able to pull in the CIA stuff, or did you feel like it was turning a really hard, rusty flywheel?
So like the CIA stuff has always been very natural for me. In fact, I was actually talking with another author, Sean Bessie, the other day, and I was like, does it feel like my stuff is forced? I was just asking for an honest opinion because she'll tell me the truth. And I was like, she's like, no, she goes, that's one of the things I love, is that it's just very natural, because to me, it's secondhand knowledge. So it's like talking about getting up and going and having breakfast in the morning. You know, we all do it. And so for me, when you're talking about government, who does what and things like that, it's second nature to me. So I don't really think about having to put things in. So
and trying to fit. You can tell when a writer's done a whole bunch of research and they're putting it in there to show their research. It's credible, right? And I do not feel that when I'm reading your stuff. It is really natural. It is very organic, the way and I learn so much. I love learning about protocol, and now, you know, I think about when I go into a place, you know, like I'm getting the lay of the land and I'm looking at
where the exits.
You know? Exactly. I mean, this is really good stuff, and especially in Mistaken Reality, where you're talking about a really difficult subject, you know, of human trafficking, where I love that there was teaching things in there along the way too. And it wasn't like a preaching style. It was more of a instructive, and then helping those that were involved. And I won't say any more about that, but I just want to say, I loved how you wove that in. It was so delightful, really great. And I love
thank you.
Those that are listening, you know, it's clean romance. And I love that you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you weave those things in, even if it's just a picture of a Latter-day Saint temple or something like that.
Right.
The things that you weave in, what was that a conscious decision to make that be a part of all of your books or some of your books, or what was the thought process behind that?
So really, when I started, the first book I wrote, it took me literally like 7 years to write it. And I just kept rewriting it and rewriting it. And one of the things, because I did not have the skill as an author when I started to know kind of how to really develop characters well. And as soon as I made them members of my church, then it was like they had this moral code that I could relate to. And so that's how I started with that. And so it really was a conscious effort, you know, a conscious decision. But then what has happened is, over the years, I have a lot of people who do read my books that are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I was, you know, and they're like, I just wish you didn't have all this religious stuff in here. And I'm like, okay, you know what, let me see if I can maybe have some books that would appeal to both sides, that still have the same moral code, that still have, you know, a good balance of morality and, you know, and just family values and things like that, because there are a lot of people outside of my faith that want that. And so, but what happens is, I'm really bad at naming characters. And so if I have, like, for example, in Mistaken Reality, I was like, okay, I really need to bring in a special forces team in for this one part of the book. I was like, oh wait, I know one. And they just happen to be the same religion as I am. So I'm like, okay, sorry, they're coming in. And so it ended up throwing this little religious part in. Just, it wasn't intentional, but it just happened because And of course, one of my secondary characters was already that religion, so it just tied in really well. So it's
I
not
love it.
always deliberate of who's going to do what. It was really more what naturally happens. Because like my New Guardian series does not have any religion in it per se, but sometimes they'll interact with these my Saint Squad series, which does have some religion in it. So some of them it's just people living their lives, and some of them have that religious background, and some of them it's more, like, I believe in God, but that's kind of as far as I go.
And I think it's fabulous the way you weave it in, because the Saint Squad, you just love them, the way that they interact together, the way that they're on the same page. And then you have people who have diverse belief systems and things like that. And it's all works together. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love the fact too, that you mix suspense and thrill and, thriller stuff, and then government intrigue and romance. You always have this thread of romance. And again, it's always clean. And I love that. Have you found for yourself, as far as your readers and people who read your book, have you found that they stay with you through the whole thing, through all these different sort of fingerling genres? Or do you find that you're gathering new ones or letting go of some? Or how does that work for you? Because it's not always easy to split yourself between a few genres.
So generally, I found that most people will follow the different genres. Sometimes when I go to contemporary romance, I'll have somebody who's like, oh, that's not quite, like sometimes my not so great reviews on contemporary romance are because people were really looking at more action. They're like, well, it just didn't really move as fast. Well, that's right. It was on purpose.
It's a contemporary romance.
It's a contemporary romance. So, but I've actually even found some of the men will even read my romance just because they're used to my suspense and everything. But the other thing too is all of my romances don't really follow a boy meets girl kind of concept. It's really, usually there's a deeper element in it. Like, my first one, chances are, had to do with somebody trying to fight cancer. And so the core, yes, the romance was a lot of fun, and it was wonderful seeing the characters develop and everything. But the core of it really was this person going to survive, this struggle. And so, that's not uncommon for me to have other elements in it. Chance for Home was probably more classic romance, but so a lot of it's more of a family saga kind of thing that comes along. So,
and people love those family sagas, and that kind of begs the question: with CIA background, are your stories kind of a reflection of things that you experienced there, or is it completely different? And these, little disclaimer, none of this is actually real.
I think it's a combination. It's just like any author, you kind of are starting with that question, what if? And so you take a little piece of, curiosity, and you're like, okay, if I take this situation, what would happen if? And so, like, for example, my book Lockdown, that was inspired by the Virginia Tech shooting. And it was like, I was watching, and here I live in Virginia. So it was very, very powerful, because literally we saw friends and neighbors running out of their houses, getting into their cars to go see if their kids survived. So it was just heartbreaking. You're watching this on the news and stuff. So it begged I saw this one interview with a person who had survived one of the worst classrooms. And I was like, what would it be like to be in her shoes 2 years from now? How would somebody like that survive and heal? And so that's the question that became Lockdown. And I started writing it, it was truly therapeutic, just having gone through so much trauma with, just everyone was traumatized by it. And people don't always, we're kind of in that state right now of people struggle with, whether it's the isolation from the coronavirus or, the protests and racial, unrest and things like that. You can mourn even if you don't have a personal connection with that. If you see somebody has struggles, that doesn't mean you can't, you may not go through an emotional reaction to it. And so that was really what was behind that book. And my next Saint Squad book is actually based, it comes off of that, of Lockdown, in a completely different spin that my son inspired. So it's fun to see, kind of like where you can kind of go from the ashes and see what you can build after something happens.
And it shows again to me that every genre can be cathartic. It can be healing. Yeah. It can be a vehicle for that. And I think really good writing does that, no matter what genre that it is. And I love that I love that nod to your son. Do you find that as being a mother, that has helped your writing more than people would think, oh, then you don't have time to write, and then you don't have time to go to all the conferences and hobnob and live that author life in the tweed suit, right? But what have you found how has motherhood helped you with that?
Well, I think one of the things is, my kids are a wealth of ideas. It really does help. But um, I mean, I think that if you think, sometimes people have this idea of if I could just go in my little, room in my office and I can just write and then I'll just have all the success. And it's like, okay, or retreat, this wonderful, the beautiful glen in Ireland with the wonderful view, or, the mountain cabin, or, whatever it is. And it's like, we're getting our ideas from living. And so it's living each day is what a lot of times is going to give us some of those ideas of, just the interactions and stuff like that. And honestly, like, it's kind of funny. My husband doesn't read any of my books. And so I can use him mercilessly, but he has a great sense of humor. So it's like, we'll have different conversations. And so every once in a while I'm reading through something and going, oh my gosh, that could have totally been us, having this conversation. But, it's the same thing with my kids. What do they care about? It helps me keep things, because, I'm not 20 something years old anymore, but seeing what my kids are caring about at their ages, I was like, okay, yeah, I totally understand the stress level it's a different kind of stress now than when I was that age. So
I love that. And I find that to be the case too. I get some of my best lines. I get some of my best concepts because of things they say or their opinion on things. And I love the point that you make, because I think women listening especially will feel this way. I have so many women. I teach a course of helping people become an influential writer, speaker, media personality, blah, blah, blah. But the biggest concern they have is, well, I don't have this big block of time to write. And I just start laughing. I've been writing for over 20 years. And I'm like, it's not like, you just don't get that, right? Yeah. And that's a dream. That's the fallacy, right? But it's funny that even when you get that, and I'm now getting to the other side a little bit more, but I remember I was interviewing Josie Kilpack and she said, my kids are grown now and I have the time and I'm not half as efficient as I used to be as a mom. So I'm sure you found the same thing. We get good ideas. You have to be more efficient. You have to really hunker down. When you're writing, you're focused and you're present. Yeah. And I think it's more productive, and I think it's actually more enjoyable. And I love the idea that you say that you write from life. And that reminds me of Jane Austen so much, even though she has a totally different genre. But, I think that's what's so compelling and so global about what she does, is that she just wrote so authentically from life. So you could see yourself or people you knew in her stories in it. And that's the same thing with yours, even though you're talking about CIA and government intrigue, right? We can still, you distill it down to the human story. And I love how you said it starts with a good question, because it does. All good stories start with a good question. I love that. Yeah. What's been one of the difficult things that you've experienced with writing? What have been some of the challenges with, that's 30 books. I mean, oh my goodness, that's a lot. And I mean, the amount of award nominations, never mind the actual awards, is incredible. So what's been some of the things that have been the challenges?
I mean, I think probably when I started, I didn't have really a support system when I first started. Like I said, I was a closet writer. Nobody really knew what I did. People where I live here in Virginia found out that I was a writer when they would go out to Utah and visit and see that my books in bookstores. Was literally how they were learning that I was an author. And so, it was a lot of fun because it's different. Like if you're an attorney or a doctor, people have a preconceived notion of what you do. If you're an author, it's like, hey, I'm a writer. It's like, in today's world, it's like, well, are you self-published? Are you any good? Like, how much money do you make? Like, right. You almost feel like you're bragging. And so it's really a weird dynamic when you're in an entertainment industry, because it's like, to say what you do, it sounds like you're giving up bragging rights. And it's like, so I think that was one of the biggest challenges, is for me to learn how to own that and just say, well, I'm a housewife and I write on my spare time. It's like, okay, this isn't really just a hobby now. I can say that, yes, I do this.
It's official.
Yes. So that was a difference. And then you get on the other side of it, now I've got 30 books in, and sometimes you'll have people who are like, people who get to know me at all know that I'm the same person I was before. Like there's what you see is what you get. There's not a whole lot there, but sometimes people will be like, oh, you're the author. And there's almost this pedestal they put you on. And it's like, okay, yeah, I don't know what that looks like. So back down to the ground, like,
right.
I still have laundry and dishes and, kids who are going to be like, I don't want to be in at 11. I want to be in at midnight, whatever. Yeah. So it's normal life. and it's kind of an interesting balance, because you do love that attention of, well, I enjoyed your book and things like that, but then you also don't want to overshadow that everyone has talents. Sometimes somebody's best talent, they're like, I've had friends tell me, oh, I don't really have any talents. And they're the best listener. They're the most intuitive people as far as seeing when somebody needs something. So everyone has talents. And so that's been one of the coolest things of being an author, is trying to help people recognize that, hey, just because my name is out in front of people does not mean that I am more important, or that I feel like I'm more important than you are. It's just, I'm very fortunate that I have a gift that the Lord has blessed me with and allows me to share. So.
Oh, I love that attitude. And I think, I always talk about the difference between American actors and British actors. So forgive me out there, anybody. I was raised in Scotland. But I've always said British actors don't take themselves too seriously. They can be the most well-known, like amazing Harry Potter people. And they're just like having tea and biscuits with people. Like they really don't take it on, a lot of those good BBC kind of people. But I love that attitude. I remember Jennifer Nielsen saying, I think it was when she became a New York Times bestselling author. Anyway, there's something like that, or a big award. Anyway, she's telling her family, because she usually doesn't talk about it. And they were asking about why was she so happy or something like that. Anyway, she said, yeah, so this happened. And her kids kind of beat, and then, oh, okay, good. What's for dinner? And she's like, my kids just totally keep me on the down low. Like, they keep me in a place that I'm not going to get a big head, even if I wanted to, right? So I think that's wonderful. And I think that's another blessing of motherhood. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you real without getting too off on a path of the unknown and too, onto myself. So is there, for aspiring authors that are listening out there, do you have any tips for, I love the fact that you brought up that your first 3 books were horrible. They were horrendous, right? And I know Anne Lamott talks about, there will always be one book that will not be published. This one will be yours. Right? Like there's always going to be one that stays in the drawer that you're sure would be a New York Times bestselling book, right? So I love, and I'm heartened by the fact that you wrote those 3 and you're like, I knew that they weren't that good. But the practice of it was huge. You were actually getting that out of your system and learning how to do character arc and all of those things.
Right.
So for budding authors out there who are a little nervous to even take the plunge, what's some thoughts and ideas you have for them?
I think part of the thing is just write. I mean, it is just, even if you never think it's going to see the light of day, if there's a story in you, you never know if it might have an impact on somebody else in the future. Even if it's just helping you to give yourself an escape and create something wonderful that you want to read. Because all of my books have been something that I just wanted to read. That's why I wrote them. But even like my very first novel that I wrote, I didn't have any skills. I had no toolbox, I just had none. And that's actually what I'm working on right now. It's going to turn into 2 novellas and 2 novels out of the single book, because once you expand and actually add character and plot, it's amazing what will happen to it. But the first half of it's already been accepted. So even if you think it is awful, which I will tell you, like BYU's asked for my papers, and I may actually have to donate the original manuscript just to prove how bad it can be before you start, because we all start there. People forget that we all start at ground zero. We all start without a toolbox. And if you can find somebody who can be really honest with you and gentle at the same time to help you, because when you're first, helping critique, you're looking at what's the biggest problem and find that biggest problem. And now, all right, once that's fixed, what's the next biggest problem? And so we're really trying to just gently mold, just like we would, when you're raising a child, you don't tell them run across the room. You're going to teach them how to crawl and then walk, and then they're going to stumble a little bit before they're running. And it's going to look a lot different than when they're 18 years old and running on the lacrosse field. So, keeping in mind that even after, like, I have friends that are a couple of books in that, hey, you want to go ahead and you really do need to take some time, like it's okay. You're not going to be at the same place somebody is at 20.
That's right. Or someone who's written 15 books and you're comparing yourself. And I love the fact that you encourage people to give themselves permission to grow into their writing. And I think that's so huge because we all think we've got this amazing, Josie said the same thing. I had the same thing. I look back now at a novel, like 5-7 years ago that I just knew was just going to be a bestseller. And I read it now and I'm thinking, who wrote this drivel? I mean, honestly, and you can't see it. I think one of the best things that helped me at the early stage was to get a writing group. And that helped me to be able to trade things back. What's been your experience with that?
So when I first started, I couldn't use a writing group because I used to be CIA. All of my work has to clear them before I could show it to anybody. And so I've now, because I do enough contemporary, like I do some contemporary romance, I do some other things that, while they are suspense, there's segments that don't have to do with that. I can actually share it with a writer's group. And luckily the group I'm in, like they both have husbands who have top secret clearances or have. So it makes it a little bit easier because if there's something like, I can't share certain things with them, but a lot of things I can share without having to really worry about it. Because I know that, it doesn't have anything to do with, the CIA has to clear the whole thing, but when it's in pieces, there's nothing intel in there.
That is great. So do you actually,
a lot.
So do you actually have to send your manuscript to the CIA for them to sign off on it?
Yes.
Wow. So does that ever make you nervous?
It is weird when you get a piece of mail and it has a page of your manuscript and it has redaction marks on it.
Oh,
so
my word, it's like hidden figures right before us. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and usually I'm really good. Like some of the things that redacted early on probably would not be redacted today if it was just because of certain things have come out. But yeah, the last one I sent in, they just sent it back to me last week and it was cleared within a few weeks. So usually they're really good. I know it's hard right now because, everything is a little crazy, but overall, they've been really good. But it's anything with intelligence. So that's one of the reasons I'll actually skip over to the contemporary romance on occasion is because it has to go through that process, especially right now I'm at 3 books a year. So if I can do one contemporary romance, it only puts the burden of 2 over onto the CIA. And it gives me one thing that we know that production wise, if we need to shift something around, if we get a snag of something with the CIA that, I've got a little bit of flexibility. So like I actually sent in like 3 books almost within 3 weeks of each other because I knew that I'm like, this is when they go, even though they came in out of order because I knew the CIA element would change it.
I love that. And speaking of, how has been your experience with the publishing world as far as traditional? What's your thoughts on that and your experience with it?
So my experience was kind of unique in that I basically went to a bookstore and I looked at what was in what I would consider my shelf, like where would I shelve my book? And the logical place for me, when I was looking at it, I was pulling off books and I was like, well, this is similar to what I write. And I made a list of all the publishers. And number 1 on my list was Covenant Communications. Number 2 on my list was Deseret Book. And so I went to Covenant Communications and I submitted my first manuscript and they came back and they basically said, we like the story, but your characters, it's kind of like digging a ditch. You're 2 feet deep and we want 10 feet deep. But if you'll redo it, we would love to see it back. And so I was like, okay, great. And so I took literally a whole year just polishing this manuscript. I was like, I have a chance to make this better. I'm not going to blow it. And by the time I sent it in, I was like, you know what? I love this story. If they don't like it, oh well. I am thrilled with what I've created. I'm enjoying reading it. So I accomplished the purpose I had, which was to give myself a book that I wanted to read. And I sent it in, and a month from the day I put it in the mail, because back then we put it in the mail. It wasn't email back then.
Yes.
So a month from the day I put it in the mail, I get a call from the managing editor at Covenant saying, we're accepting your book. And I was like, what? Because I waited months and months when I first sent it in. It was like in there for like 8 months. And so I was completely shocked that it came in that quickly. And now I understand the submission process better, that it was a resubmission rather than a full submission and all that stuff. But so I basically got accepted by really my first
Your first
attempt.
one. Yes.
And so, even though my earlier book, the one that I'm doing now, I'd sent it out for like a couple of contests, and I think I may have sent it out for a couple of other places, but my total rejection letters is maybe like 6. And Jennifer Nielsen has like a binder. Now, granted, she's a New York Times bestseller, so we're gonna think that how cool that is, that
right.
rejection sometimes leads. But basically my publisher, and the funny thing is, Deseret Book 2 years later bought up Covenant. And so I ended up with my 2 top choices without even meaning to. But yeah, basically everything I've ever submitted, ultimately they have accepted. They've had a couple of rewrite requests over the years, but I think one of the reasons though I've been successful in that is that every book I write, I kind of have that mentality of I don't want to ever disappoint my publisher or my readers. And so I always want it to be at least as good as the last one. And while sometimes somebody's gonna be like, well, that really wasn't content-wise what I really enjoyed as much as I liked, say they don't like the Royal series as much as they like the Saint Squad or something. I don't ever want to be that author that everyone's like, oh, well, she just knows that we're gonna buy it because her name's on the cover, so she didn't try. And I've seen people that have had make those comments. So I was like, I don't want to be that person. So as far as self-publishing, I've never really had any experience with that other than we did a fundraiser for Rob Wells a little while ago, a couple of years ago. But every time I think that Covenant's going to turn something down, they are like, no, we'll take it. I was like, okay then. So
that is wonderful. And I think what's great too is another thing to your longevity is this particular genre, that you walk this beautiful line of being able to entertain men and women, and especially women, with something that's so male, with this government intrigue and things like this. But you keep it to a depth of it's intriguing, it's problem solving, and yet you have the romance element that's genuine and organic. It's not just stuck in there for a splice. And so I think you present this really full experience that not everybody can write, and especially with your background, you're writing it so organically, and you can feel that. So I think this really all plays into this wonderful big potpourri, if you will, of being CIA agent, mother, wife, friend, neighbor, and all of these things. And it kind of wafts into your characters and kind of threads through, so that it provides this organic experience that you can get done with a book and you feel good and you feel uplifted and you've had a good read. You've escaped into a world that's been good and you can trust that it's going to be a good world. If people are listening, they're like, okay, I've been in a cave. Where do I find this woman? Where can they find you easiest?
Okay, so my website is traciabramson.com. So that has all of my books listed and everything, but my books are mostly available on, Amazon, Deseret Book and Seagull Book are usually, for the older ones, sometimes Seagull Books is the best place to find them because everyone, like somebody emailed me yesterday and said that one of my books was on sale for like $650 because it was showing at a friend. I'm like, no, please don't do that. Sorry, whoever's selling it for $650, I lost you a sale, but go to Seagull Book and just on their website you'll probably find it.
We're going to see it at Sotheby's. That's where we're going to see these books. Yeah. I think this is so wonderful. And before we wrap up, what's the project you're working on right now?
Okay, so right now I'm actually working on several, but one of my big ones is it's actually a recent historical. So that is because I was writing this back in the 1990s. It didn't quite work in today's world, so I had to wait long enough. This is why this first book has taken so long for me to read too. It is becoming this recent historical series. So it's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. And again, I finished recent Mistaken Reality, and there's others that I've read that I've really enjoyed. I read one of the Royal series. It was so good, but really enjoy the clean, the fast paced. It's so good. Mistaken Reality, I couldn't put it down. I need to know what happens next. I need to know what happens next.
That's good to hear.
That's exactly what you want. I always say I want to write and read a 2 a.m. book where I know I need to go to bed at 10:30, but I am staying up to finish that book because it's worth it.
Yes.
Thanks so much for taking time today and giving us that sort of glimpse on the other side of being an author and that organic path that you've taken. It's wonderful. We wish you well. Thanks for taking time to be with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Connie.
And if you want more of these, go ahead and subscribe below. And as always, check out ConnieSokol.com for newsletters, Studio 5 segments, my TV, my radio, my podcasts, all these wonderful things. You can get them right there, ConnieSokol.com, so we can connect. Remember, take the next step to live your purpose-filled life.